everybody. We have taken a bit of break between drinks. It's been a while since our last episode, but I want to thank our Property Power team for joining me on Not Another Property Podcast. So just before we get into today's episode, I want to provide just a brief disclaimer. Nothing that is being discussed today is specific personal advice. It's all very general and factual in nature. If you are looking for any specific advice pertaining to your personal situation, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of these financial and legal service professionals. Today, I'm joined by Daniela Musatano from Titlespace Conveyancing, mortgage manager Michael O'Malley from Rate Money Sydney CBD, and I'm joined by Andrew Chan from Phoenix Wealth Management. Thank you for joining me, guys. I wanted to start with Daniela. We're talking today a little bit about buying with a family, whether it's a shortcut to getting into the market or whether it's an absolute legal mess waiting to happen. So Daniela, for me, I wanted to understand what are the biggest legal mistakes that families make when they buy together and they assume it'll just work out afterwards?
Well, I guess the biggest mistake is to assume the relationship itself is safe. We don't know what's going to happen. It is important to have documents in place to protect the transaction. So, for example, from the start, you need to know the percentage of ownership, how much, each person will own of the property. You need to understand what's going to happen if one person wants out, what's going to happen if one person passes away, or if one is out of a job. So it is important to have documents in place to cover all of that. And the mistake is not preparing for that. Another thing that we see often is parents giving deposit money to children, and at a certain point they go into a de facto relationship, and what's going to happen once the couple splits up. So often what we do, we prepare mortgage documents and lodge caveats on title of the property to protect that deposit paid by the parents.
And I'm sure there's a number of different dynamics as well between whether it's two siblings or whether it's a parent helping out their children or even children helping out their parents to purchase a home for their retirement or something along those lines. And I feel it's important to understand from a legal perspective, not only how you enter into the property, but the scenarios of exiting that property as well. What are some of the questions that you have to ask when you're going through these cases with clients?
Well, it's to find out exactly what they want to happen if one of the scenarios I mentioned before happens. So if somebody passed away or, if there's a split up in a relationship, and based on those answers, we can prepare the applicable documents and then lodge protections on title accordingly.
Yeah, and just get an understanding of how to protect yourself and what happens in those worst cases. Correct. As well. Yeah. And maybe we talked a little bit about mortgage documents, but I wanted to ask you, Mike, what is the difference between maybe using a family guarantee and actually buying a property together? Which one normally creates less risk, or are there pros and cons to one way over the other?
Yeah. If you want to cut straight to the headline, for my money, a parental guarantee or family pledge loan is always inherently less risky and easier. In that situation, basically, you've got parents or siblings saying, I'm going to lend you some equity in my property, and you can release that guarantee when you've got sufficient equity in yours. And there are two factors at play helping that along. Your property is generally increasing in value, and you're paying down the loan. So you're building equity all the time. If you're in a co-buying situation, everyone's on the loan, everyone's on title, everyone's making joint decisions about what happens with the property, everyone's jointly and severally liable, so if someone can't pay, the others have to pick up the slack. So a parental guarantee or family pledge is a much less risky and a lot safer way of going about acquiring a property, I think.
And maybe just to wind back a little bit, if we could explain in layman's terms, essentially what is a family guarantee and how does it operate?
Yeah, well, what you're doing is use parents and children as an example. The parents are saying, I'm going to let the bank take security over a certain proportion of equity or the value of my property, but they're not actually contributing any money, they're not on the loan. All they're doing is letting the kids tap into that equity. And then later on, as I say, when the purchase property increases in value and you get back down to the right sort of LVR or ratio of the loan, you can release the guarantee. And it's not without risk. what happens if the parents want to sell their home, for example? So, it's not a 100% bulletproof solution, but I think it's a lot less, there are a lot less pitfalls in that approach than there are in buying a property together.
Yeah, understandable. So if we put it into a scenario, maybe if we had sort of adult parents who use their home to guarantee that the kids can, purchase their home essentially, that property would then be put up as security, and then the kids would be able to purchase that property. One day down the track, if that property were to go up in value, they could remove the parents' property as security?
Yeah, you just release the guarantee and everyone plays on their own.
Okay, no, very good. Maybe more for you, Andrew, how should families think about how they contribute if there is an imbalance between kids, and how should they plan their exit before committing to buying?
Yeah, good question. I think it starts with a lot of families approach this as a purchase, when really it's a long-term business relationship. So your parents have their own objectives, they want to help their children, it's very altruistic, and the children are children, so they need help. But children invariably grow up. They have they're individuals, they have their own goals, wants, needs, and life changes, right? So Danny mentioned that someone might pass away. So we'll talk about exit, because you shouldn't be getting into any transaction unless you know how you're going to get out of it, purely from an investment standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's a sale, buyout, or life change, smart families get the documentation right, talk about this very early on. In terms of contribution, it's very important to document contribution, because we all have different personalities. You got the child that will do everything right, save, pay everything down quickly. You got the child who loves to go out, have a party, enjoy life. Who doesn't? And often you are, as parents, you want to treat them equally. But if you're party to this transaction, you want to save the discussion point between you want it to be I've contributed this much and be able to prove it, rather than we're both entitled to the proceeds equally. And so that's, in terms of contribution, documentation is king. For control is very important. So again, documentation dictates control, because what happens when one person wants to renovate and another doesn't? What happens when you're upkeeping this property and the relationship's working well, but someone needs to exit out of that property and they want to sell, but the other one wants to hold? So we have different life changes. If you don't have the right good leaver, bad leaver clauses in your documentation, you'll be left with a very illiquid asset, which makes it very difficult for the family.
And I suppose that's where the work that each of you do together is very important, because as a financial planner, I often say that financial planners will sit on the balcony overlooking the dance floor, seeing how the individual players interact with each other. And you're coordinating that, this is how control should look amongst the broader family. So if I'm helping out one child, then the other child might not be disadvantaged, or for whatever reason. How is that broader conversation with those family sets? How is that broader conversation?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We've done renovations in the boardroom. It's naturally because intergenerational wealth planning is now the thing, right? And so it's all about getting them in the very beginning, having those conversations, dictating, this is what we're going to do for you, but this is how you're going to behave, and do you agree with that? And so, and in that process, once they've got agreement and they realize they are the guardrails in which we're for this transaction, then when it comes time, it's not something they're figuring out, or they're open to their own interpretation.
Yeah, 100%. And I find that, when you have those dynamics between multiple generations and even multiple parties within a transaction, it's hard to get an understanding of what everybody's expectations are, or often they may have conflicting expectations. Because realistically, a lot of people have been out of the market for a while. So I see it a lot in parents helping out younger children. Realistically, as a parent, you might be in your, say, 50s or 60s, you haven't purchased property in a while. And more often than not, I find that people really only transact 2 or 3 properties in their lifetime. They buy a first home, they'll buy a family home, they may have either an investment property or a family home. So they don't have a great breadth of experience in terms of what expectations to set, in terms of, what does that property purchase look like, and even the purpose of that property. So a lot of the younger generation nowadays, they'll buy their first home and they'll use it as a stepping stone to get into their next home. Often it's because they want to use first home buyer guarantee or low deposit scheme or something along those lines. So we're finding that the kids have ulterior motives to the parents. The parents want it to be a good investment to help them step into the next property. The kids just want to get out of the house sometimes. And then we're also seeing the rise of intergenerational living. So that might be more of a question for you, Daniela. Have you any case studies around those scenarios where, because we're seeing the rise of intergenerational accommodation and residential property, how does that sit in terms of a legal perspective? How do people navigate those waters?
I've seen a few, especially for some ethnic groups. Normally, the kids will go onto the title and they will just take the parents to live on them, but there's no, if there is contribution on the day-to-day living, maybe the case, but mostly we see the couple, the daughter and the son-in-law taking on the loan, buying the property in their name and just having the parents living with them.
And then the conversation is like, potentially there could be the parents, you might have one of the children living with them and grandchildren, and then there might be some other siblings that don't reside in that intergenerational home. How is that conversation in terms of, this is what the estate's going to look like, or this is how we're going to divest assets in the event of, when you pass away? How is that conversation?
It's an important conversation because it's not just that. You have children always have different abilities or different ambitions. So one might be, if you're in a transaction, very, very capable and that first stage is that first step property and they're ready to go again, right? And so they might want to move to a better area. They can do it purely on their income. You have another child, the second child, who probably needs a bit of help to sell that property to then have enough to do it. And you've got the child that never leaves home, but that child takes care of mum and dad, right? And so you have so many contributions, financial, their own ability versus taking care of the family. By having those conversations early on, you can value those. But the thing is that when they're so young and you're making these decisions, you can't possibly know what they are. So that's why the financial planning aspect is so important to say, hey, as we get to each life stage, let's come in, let's discuss, let's reset. Let's make sure that what you're talking about is estate planning, that it is not something left to a decision when mum and dad aren't in the room or no longer mentally capable to make their decisions and give their influence. So you want to have those conversations because estate planning is about maintaining the bonds of family beyond. You're helping not to make them wealthier. Hopefully, you're helping them to make them wealthier and to stay together as a family. And so we have those decisions, we reset their minds and thinking, and sometimes if they don't agree, they're not party to that. And then we formalize that in documentation.
And I'm sure that's all part of succession planning.
I was going to ask something. We did have a case where the daughter and the son-in-law, they were buying a property and her parents sold the property to contribute towards the purchase and go into the mortgage, but they couldn't get into the mortgage because of age.
I think you're all just reinforcing my fears that I'm never going to get my kids off the books. Is that what you're telling me?
So we had to prepare some documents, obviously, and did some sort of like protection on the title, but they couldn't be on the mortgage.
I guess, are there options where there's different entities that you could purchase in, and how does that factor into the mortgage, into the home loan process?
There are, but again, I think that's probably more a Daniela question than me. The structure or the entities are not really my concern. I'm more concerned about affordability. There undoubtedly are. Yeah. But yes, that's not my area of expertise. That's where I rely on Danny.
And I'm sure it works differently between a discretionary trust or a company or a unit trust. Are there different legalities involved there?
We don't do that. Normally what we do, like if we want to put some sort of protection on title, is by way of caveat. And doing so, normally we prepare mortgage documents where the parties sign, they agree, and then we're able to lodge a caveat on title.
Yeah, awesome.
And there are restrictions around what types of trusts borrowers will entertain as well.
Yeah.
Discretionary and family generally fine, but if you get into hybrids and other sorts of more complex trusts, they're not so keen to lend.
I know we have that topic coming up around buying in a trust, and it has been a hot topic lately, so I will save that for another episode. But what I want to do is I want to thank everybody for their contribution to this episode. I'm sure the audience has found it very insightful, so thank you very much for your time and expertise.